Welcome to the deep dive. We take, well, heaps of research, expert thinking, complex ideas,
hmm
and we try to boil it all down into something you can actually
Yeah,
use.
something actionable.
Exactly. And today, our mission, our goal, is to find a real shortcut. Not, a quick fix, but a genuine path to breakthrough thinking.
That's right. The challenge we're tackling here is, well, it's structural. Coming up with truly new, innovative ideas. It's absolutely essential, right, for business, tech, solving big societal problems.
Mhm.
But it's hard. The world's incredibly complex, and frankly, our brains are kind of wired to resist those really radical new thoughts.
So how do you break through, cut through all that noise and complexity? For this deep dive, we've looked at structured ideation techniques for what's next. We've dug into the internal barriers, those cognitive biases we all have, and also how to apply systemic thinking to really messy real-world problems.
Yeah, and the aim here isn't just finding like a quick win or some magic bullet.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the actual structure of thought you need to get beyond the usual way of doing things.
Right.
We want methods that lead to real, lasting results, maybe a whole new market category or genuine systemic change, not just tinkering around the edges.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because before you even think about generating new ideas, you kind of have to look in the mirror, right? Address these mental shortcuts, heuristics that guide us every day.
Absolutely.
Evolutionarily, they're great, kept us alive, saved energy,
Sure. Survival skills,
but they really box in creativity, don't they? They keep pulling us back to what feels safe and familiar.
they absolutely do. And maybe the first big hurdle is something called the curse of knowledge.
Okay.
It's this funny thing where the more experience or success you have in an area, well, the more likely you are to make certain errors that actually limit your imagination.
Huh. How does that work?
Your brain just defaults to what worked before,
Mhm.
which means, counterintuitively, sometimes the older, more successful people on a team, they can struggle the most with really divergent out there thinking.
Because their expertise becomes a kind of blinder.
Exactly. It's like a constraint. Most of our big decisions, especially under pressure, they're guided subconsciously by those past successes, those shortcuts.
Which pushes us back to the comfort zone. Okay, so our sources pointed to some specific cognitive biases that just kill innovation. Let's start with confirmation bias.
Yeah, this one's huge because it shapes the information we even look for. We instinctively seek out stuff that confirms what we already believe is true.
Right. So if I think option A is the best.
You'll unconsciously look for data or even generate ideas that prove option A is right. And you'll just filter out or ignore anything that suggests B or C might be the real game changer. You become closed off.
So how do you fight that? How do you force yourself out of that loop?
Well, one really practical thing is to deliberately adopt what you might call a seek disconfirmation mindset.
Okay.
You actually assign someone on the team, or even yourself, the role of devil's advocate. Their only job is to find evidence against your main idea, to challenge your working hypothesis.
So treat your idea like something to be broken, not protected.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Treat it as an assumption to test, maybe even prove false, not some precious solution you have to defend.
Which sounds like a good lead into the next big one. Loss aversion bias. This is that awful feeling, right? The fear of losing what you've already put in time, money, effort, even just emotional attachment.
Oh, absolutely. You stick with a bad decision just because you've already sunk resources into it.
Yeah.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
And the moment you, as they say, fall in love with your solutions, loss aversion just takes hold.
So what's the counter? How do you mentally break free?
A really powerful technique is sometimes called the zero-based budgeting approach,
Yeah.
applied mentally.
Okay.
You ask yourself, okay, knowing what I know now, if I hadn't already invested anything in this, would I make this same decision today? If the honest answer is no, you have to cut it, irrespective of the sunk cost.
Intellectually, that makes sense. But wow, that sounds tough in practice, especially with deadlines and pressure from above.
It is tough because these biases, they're often driven by fear. Take ambiguity bias.
Yep.
That pushes us towards options where the outcome feels known, predictable, even if the potential reward is tiny.
Compared to something riskier, but with a much bigger payoff.
Exactly. Innovation, by its very nature, means stepping into the unknown, into ambiguity. So this bias, it just strangles the whole process. It stops us even considering those high-risk, high-reward ideas.
And then you've got the social stuff laid on top, like the bandwagon bias, everyone jumping on an idea just because it seems popular,
Which often gets tangled up with authority bias.
where the boss's idea wins just because they're the boss.
Pretty much. Even if other ideas on the table are objectively better, The senior person speaks, and suddenly that idea has more weight.
And these individual biases, they scale up, right? They become organizational problems.
Directly, it's like Ray Dalio points out, organizations often put up with really bad crying problems simply because fixing them feels too hard, too disruptive.
So they just accept mediocrity or even failure.
They accept chronic bad outcomes to protect the status quo, because fixing it might mean shaking things up too much.
Like disrupting funding or establish partnerships or just the internal pecking order.
Exactly that. The personal fear of loss, the comfort with the familiar, it morphs into this organizational defense mechanism against real change.
Okay, so the barriers are real. They're deep-seated, protecting our comfort zones. If these biases always push us back towards just tweaking things, towards analogy, how do you actually force a break?
Right.
This is where I think it gets really interesting. The tool the sources highlight is thinking from first principles,
Yes. First principles thinking. It's basically the opposite of reasoning by analogy.
which is just copying what others do, maybe with a slight twist.
Pretty much. Analogy is iteration. First principles thinking, or FPT, is about clarifying really complex problems by stripping them down. You separate the fundamental truths, the core ideas, the scientific facts, the essentials, from all the assumptions we've layered on top of them.
So you take it apart.
You take it apart, you question the assumptions, and then you rebuild it from that foundational truth. It shifts your focus from just making random changes to finding choices that have a real shot at success.
Okay, and a key way to apply this, I gather, is this distinction between form and function. Can you unpack that?
Sure. So most people, most companies, they tend to project the current form forward. If you make backpacks, you think, how can I improve this backpack? Better zippers, new pockets, different material. That's iterating on the form.
Right, the bag itself.
But first principles demands you drop your loyalty to that existing form. You have to ask, what is the fundamental function I'm trying to achieve?
So for the backpack, the function is.
Maybe something like storing and moving things efficiently. Once you define the function, you're free to think completely differently. You could combine the bag with, well, anything that serves that function.
And this leads to that amazing historical example, the rolling suitcase. We had wheels forever, we had bags forever.
Romans had wheeled carts and leather bags.
Yeah. But the first rolling suitcase, the kind we all use now, wasn't invented until 1970.
It's incredible, right? For centuries, innovators were stuck iterating on the form, the bag. They just couldn't see how to combine the bag, form, with the wheel, another existing form, to optimize the function of moving things easily.
Their analogy thinking just blocked it. They saw two separate things.
Completely separate. Couldn't bridge the gap.
So how do you actually do this first principles thinking? It sounds intensive.
It is rigorous. It
Yeah.
leans heavily on the Socratic method. You have to constantly clarify your thinking, challenge every assumption, ask yourself, what is the absolute bedrock truth this idea rests on? What if the complete opposite were true? Look hard for evidence. Examine the consequences of your assumptions.
Can you give an example, like the Cape Town water crisis one?
Yeah, that's a great one. So Cape Town faces a severe water shortage. The typical analogy-based thinking is build more dams, enforce stricter rationing, maybe drill deeper wells, improving the existing form of water collection.
Right. More the same, basically.
But first principles thinking asks, what is water, fundamentally?
H2O.
Right, hydrogen and oxygen. And where does it exist? Yes, in rivers and lakes, but huge amounts exist as vapor in the atmosphere. Most rainfall actually evaporates or runs off.
Okay.
So if you drop the assumption that usable water must come from traditional rainfall capture, you can ask, how do we get the H2O that's already in the air? And that leads to completely different solutions, like developing large-scale atmospheric water generators.
Wow. Okay, that's a powerful shift. But again, for a team under pressure, isn't that Socratic deep dive just too slow, breaking down every single assumption?
That's a fair point, and it's where lateral thinking comes in as a really useful complement.
Yeah.
Think of FPT as providing the depth, the rigor. Lateral thinking provides more of the speed and the freedom.
How so?
Well, unlike logical step-by-step thinking, vertical thinking, which demands correctness at each stage, lateral thinking is about deliberately trying to restructure information.
Yeah.
It actually welcomes exploring ideas that seem incorrect or absurd or tangential just to see where they lead.
So it's designed to break patterns quickly.
Exactly. It can rapidly shatter those mental patterns that first principles might take longer, more methodical effort to deconstruct.
And there are specific techniques for this, like reverse brainstorming.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Instead of asking, how do we solve problem X, you ask, how could we make problem X catastrophically worse?
Okay. Why would you do that?
because it frees you up creatively. Once you have a list of really terrible imaginative ways to worsen the problem, you flip them. You reverse those negative ideas, and often, hidden inside them are genuinely innovative solutions to the original problem.
Clever. And then there's Scamper. That's an acronym, right?
Right. Substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put to another use, eliminate, reverse. It's basically a checklist
For what?
for systematically challenging your assumptions about an existing product, service, or concept. You go through each letter and ask questions based on it, forcing you to rethink and potentially reinvent what you already have.
So, going back to the suitcase, if someone in 1960 had used Scamper, the C for combine might have prompted them. What can I combine this bag with?
Precisely. What about combining it with something totally unrelated like dot wheels? It forces that lateral jump, that connection across domains, that analogy thinking just doesn't allow.
Okay, so we have tools for breaking cognitive biases and generating novel ideas. Now let's scale this up. How do we apply this kind of structured thinking to really complex, messy, real-world situations, the kind involving lots of people, interconnected issues?
Yeah, the wicked problems, as they're sometimes called, where the root causes are tangled and simple technical fixes often backfire or cause new problems elsewhere.
Right.
This is where systems thinking becomes crucial. It's a framework specifically designed for understanding that complexity and trying to influence lasting change.
Because interventions can have unexpected ripple effects.
Exactly. Counterintuitive consequences are common. You push here and something tops up over there you didn't expect. You really have to try and map out those connections and feedback loops.
The sources used a case study on neglected tropical diseases, NTDs. How did that illustrate this?
Well, there was this huge success story within the NTD world. Drug donation programs, Mass Drug Administration, or MDA, hugely effective at getting treatments out quickly.
Okay, sounds great.
It was, in one sense. But it had a massive unintended consequence. Because the MDA was so visible and delivered such clear, immediate results, it sucked up a lot of the attention and resources. Meaning other absolutely critical things like improving water and sanitation, washing infrastructure, or controlling the vectors, like insects that spread the diseases, those got neglected.
So the success in one area inadvertently weakened others.
Precisely. The system became unbalanced. And there was another interesting dynamic related to the structure of the global NTD community itself.
What was that?
It was actually so successful, so collaborative and tight-knit, that potential new funders or partners looking in from the outside started perceiving the whole field as kind of cliquish or difficult to break into.
Wow, so their internal cohesion actually became a barrier to bringing in fresh resources or ideas.
Yeah, it inadvertently created this organizational inertia. It sort of locked the system into its existing patterns and made it harder for new players to get involved and maybe push for change beyond just the drug donation model.
That really shows how organizational dynamics, comfort zones, again, can block progress even when everyone means well.
It does. And it highlights that often the most powerful levers for change in a complex system aren't necessarily new technologies, but changes to the structure itself.
Like what?
Well, one of the key leverage points identified in that NTD analysis was the need to really systematically address how health workers are incentivized.
Ah, the incentive.
Yeah. The lack of coordination and incentives across different health programs was seen as a major roadblock to sustainable progress. Fixing that wasn't a technical problem, it was a structural one, probably involving tricky conversations about power and funding flows. Again, disrupting the status quo.
Okay, so systems thinking gives us the map of the complex territory. How do we navigate it when we're trying to actually create solutions? This is where design thinking comes in.
Exactly. Design thinking provides a really practical, human-centered pathway for developing solutions, especially within complex systems. It's usually described with 5 core stages, though it's very much nonlinear and iterative.
Right, that's empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test.
Correct. And the key thing here is that the ideate stage, that's where you plug in all those techniques we talked about earlier.
Like first principles, lateral thinking, Scamper.
Yes. You use the empathize and define stages to really understand the user and the problem deeply, uncovering assumptions. Then, in ideate, you deliberately use those structured creativity tools to challenge those assumptions and generate a huge volume of diverse, unconventional ideas.
But crucially, it doesn't stop there. It's a loop, right? Both systems thinking and design thinking emphasize this iterative process.
Absolutely critical. You take your ideas, you build quick prototypes, you test them in the real world, and the things you learn, especially the failures, which are inevitable. They aren't dead ends.
What do you do with them?
You feed that learning back into the beginning. It helps you refine your understanding, maybe even completely redefine the problem you thought you were solving.
So progress isn't about clinging to your first idea, but about objective learning and adapting based on what the real world tells you. It forces reflection, not ego.
Exactly. Did the test work? Why or why not? What does this failure tell us about our initial assumptions? Was our definition of the problem even right to begin with?
Yeah.
The constant looping and questioning is key. Hashtag outro.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway for you, the listener?
I think the core message is that truly game-changing ideas, they rarely come from just polishing what already exists. They come from deliberately, structurally abandoning those comfortable, conventional ways of thinking and having the courage, really, to embrace the uncertainty that comes with that. Yeah, and maybe a good final thought to leave people with comes from Peter Thiel. He had this provocative insight about what makes a really successful new venture, or, frankly, a groundbreaking thinker.
What was it?
He argues the single best question you can ask someone, maybe in an interview, is, what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Huh. That's a tough question.
It is, because answering it well requires more than just being smart. The answer, by definition, have to be unpopular. It probably challenges some widely held belief, some dogma, some piece of conventional wisdom built on analogy.
So it takes real courage to answer it honestly.
It takes courage, because you're putting forward something that most people might instinctively reject. Thiel suggests it's the closest we can get to actually seeing into the future by identifying and challenging the assumptions that shape how we see the past and present.
It connects back to that Ray Dalio idea too, doesn't it?
Which one?
The pain plus reflection, progress.
Ah, yes, absolutely. That feeling of resistance, the discomfort, maybe even the intellectual exhaustion you feel when you're really pushing against a core assumption or a comfortable bias. That's not something to avoid.
It's the signal you're doing it right.
It's the engine.
Yeah.
That friction is the engine for achieving real, meaningful change. So the final challenge, maybe, is question your gut reactions. Challenge those mental models you hold about how the world works. That's where the breakthroughs lie.